Hey guys, welcome to another very exciting visual effects tutorial. In my last tutorial I showed you how to use Adobe After Effects and a third-party plugin called Trapcode Particular to create some cool looking fireworks. If you haven't seen the tutorial yet, I highly recommend that you check it out. Just click on the link right here and it'll take you straight to it. In the fireworks tutorial I only showed you how to create the actual fireworks elements, but for the intro and the outro of that tutorial I actually composited those fireworks elements into the moving shot in the background of the scene. As the camera pans across the scene, you can see those fireworks elements illuminating the clouds over the skyline of Melbourne. In this tutorial, I will show you how to composite your fireworks elements into a moving shot. Now, that is actually more complicated than creating the fireworks elements themselves, so I will assume that you are very comfortable using Adobe After Effects. This tutorial probably is at an intermediate to advanced level. You should know all of the basics and you should probably have used the 3D camera tracker before. If you haven't yet, I've got tutorials on all of the basics and I have a separate tutorial on the 3D camera tracker that I do recommend you check out first. But without further ado, let's jump right into the tutorial. Here's the final composition that we will be creating in this tutorial. The fireworks are realistically composited into the background of the scene and they cast light onto the clouds and onto the buildings as they explode. And avert your eyes, this is what the original shot looks like. We actually shot the scene during the middle of the day. Because it was overcast, I was able to convert the clip to look like it was filmed at night. I have a separate tutorial that you can check out to learn in detail how to do day to night conversion. Before we can start, we need to track our footage using the 3D camera tracker so we can place all of our other elements into the scene. First, duplicate your base footage. I want to cut myself out from this clip before I apply the 3D camera tracker because I don't want my movement in the foreground to confuse the tracker. Select the pen tool and draw a mask around any foreground elements that could throw off the 3D camera tracker. Set the mask mode to subtract to cut the contents of the mask from the layer. Since I am moving my arms around in the foreground, I will animate the mask path property so that the mask can follow my movement. I do not want my hands to ever go outside of the mask as it could cause problems when we get to the tracking. Be sure to do this as precisely as you can. If you disable the base footage and scrub through your composition, you should see a black hole in your footage layer where you cut out any moving foreground elements. Nice, we're ready to track. Let's first pre-compose the mask layer. This is essential as the 3D camera tracker does not take masks into account unless they are nested. I will call this composition Tracking Comp and choose to move all attributes into the new composition. Now, finally, apply the 3D camera tracker effect to the layer. One thing I like to do with the 3D camera tracker is to enable the detailed analysis option under the advanced settings. It makes tracking a little bit slower, but it does give greater accuracy in most situations. And now you know the drill, go get some coffee, feed your pet or watch some TV. This can take a couple of minutes. Come back when the camera tracker is done tracking and solving. Scrubbing through your footage, you should see lots of track points and you should make sure they follow the movement of your camera correctly. I also like to look at the average error property and ensure it is less than 1. This means that the track points are off on average by less than 1 pixel from the location they were tracking. An average error below 1 usually indicates a good track. We're ready to roll. First, we need to cut out the sky from the shot. We will do this by using the 3-dimensional track matte for the sky and applying it to the base footage. With the 3D camera tracker effect selected, shift-click 3 track points on a flat surface of a building in the background of the scene. Then right-click and choose Create Solid and Camera from the context menu. I will rename my new solid to City Matte. Also, and this is important, open up the solid settings and increase the resolution to something really large like 3000 by 3000. Since we will be using this solid as a matte onto our footage, we don't want it to end up pixelated. Zoom out of your composition and scale down the city matte to fit over the scene precisely. Since the camera in the scene makes a swipe to the right, I will also move the solid over a little bit so that it covers the entire screen for the duration of the shot. Let's scrub through and see. Nah, not enough. Let's scale it up a little bit more and move it over to the right a tad. Cool, that seems to work fine now. Finally, and this is just so you can see what is going on, lower the opacity of the city matte layer. Here's a quick tip to keep your composition neat. Any layers I no longer require, I either delete or hide. For example, I don't need this tracking comp anymore, so I will disable its visibility. Do remember to enable the visibility on the base footage layer again, otherwise your screen will just be black. Over on the right side, I will now enable the shy flag on the tracking comp layer. I can now hide all layers with the shy flag by toggling this switch at the top of my composition. Bam! Gone! It's still there, but at least it's not cluttering up our workspace. Now it's time for some masking action. We want to mask out the sky on our city matte layer. Select the city matte, zoom in on the sky and select the pen tool. Now draw a mask around the section of the sky just along the outline of the buildings. Notice that I am actually drawing my mask a few pixels into the building. Since we shot this on a bright day and we will be converting this shot to look like it was filmed at night, I don't want any bright edges of the buildings to show. Once you have finished the mask, go over to the mask settings and set the mode to subtract to cut it out from the city matte. Now scrub through the footage and locate the next patch of sky. There's some. Just like before, use the pen tool to draw around the section of the sky. Once that is done, move on to the next section of the sky. Of course, depending on what your footage looks like, you may be able to do all of this with a single big mask, but for me I have lots of little patches that I want to cut out. Uh-oh, I'm still in the middle of drawing a mask, but I reached the end of my scene. But since we are drawing this mask on a 3D layer that we placed into a fully tracked scene, we can simply scrub through the footage to a point where the sky is visible again, zoom back in and continue drawing our mask. We want each mask to cover as much of the sky as possible. As always, do remember to set your mask to subtract mode. Notice that due to the camera movement, there might be other patches of sky that you may not yet have covered with the subtractive mask. For example, there's this big chunk on the left side here where I can see the blue of my city matte. Since I have a number of masks on this layer already, I usually like to lock down any existing masks so they don't interfere with any new ones I'm trying to draw. Now zoom in and draw another mask around the visible area of the sky. Of course, you can just adjust the shape of the masks that are already there, but I think it's just easier to add a new one. There's one more small patch here that I can see, and I will quickly fix that up by reshaping one of the masks I added earlier. For that, of course, I have to unlock the mask first so that I can edit it again. Then I can resize it to cover up the little blue patch of the city matte. And voila! If we now zoom out, we should not be able to see the city matte covering any part of the sky. We can verify that we've done a good job by bringing the opacity of the city matte back up to 100%. Scrub through your footage and the city matte should precisely overlay your city footage. Now for the fun part. To apply the matte, make sure the footage layer sits directly below it. And set the track matte option to alpha matte. Bam! All of the sky will be removed. Scrub through your footage to make sure this all looks good, and I'd say we've done a pretty decent job. Now we're ready to add some dramatic sky into the background. I have some cloud stock footage elements here. These clouds come from the free stock footage pack that videocopilot released a while ago, and there is a link to the pack in the description of this video. Drag this cloud stock footage element into your composition and place it at the bottom of your layers. Now, for one, this clip is much too short, and if you drag it under the timeline indicator, you can see that it is also much too small. So let's first resize the layer to cover the entire sky behind the city. Make sure you scrub through your footage to check that it covers all parts of your sky throughout the entire shot. In order for the sky to follow the camera's movement correctly, simply enable the 3D switch on the clouds layer. Since the footage of the clouds is actually a time lapse, I wanted to animate much slower by using a time stretch effect. For this, I will drag the layer back to the beginning of the composition. You can stretch the time of any layer by right-clicking on it and go to Time Stretch. Let's stretch the time of the layer to 500% and see what that looks like. I'm just noticing that turning our clouds into a 3D layer has shifted it off center a bit, and there's now some black background poking through at the beginning of our shot. Not to sweat, simply reposition the clouds layer to cover the hole up nicely. Again, scrub through your clip to ensure the sky remains fully covered. Seems like we'll have to scale the clouds layer up just a little bit more, but that's not a problem. Cool, that seems to do. I still think the clouds move way too quickly, so I will go back to the time stretch effect settings and jack it up to maybe, let's say, 2000%. I will also drag the layer forward a little bit in time so it doesn't start off with these bright clouds. I want a dark, angry night sky against which to cast our fireworks. Yep, that looks fine. Notice, however, that due to the very extreme time stretch on the clouds layer, it is a little bit choppy as the frame rate is very low. We can alleviate this issue simply by enabling the frame blending switch on the clouds layer and on the composition. Now that looks much smoother. Finally, let's rename the layer to Sky. Scrubbing through the clip, we may have noticed that the base footage in front of the sky is way too bright. Let's quickly fix that up. And I mean quickly. If you want all the details, check out my separate day-to-night conversion tutorial. First, apply a hue and saturation effect to your base footage. Drain most of the color from the clip and also lower the master lightness by a lot to darken the footage drastically. Then go over and apply a curves effect onto the layer. Go over to the red channel and lower it. This will tint your footage green. But since buildings aren't usually green, go over to the blue channel and bring it up a little bit to give the cityscape a nice bluish tint. Assuming that this was shot on a cloudy day where there are no harsh shadows from the sun, this should give your footage the look as if it was filmed at night. Not bad, but I think it's still a bit too bright. So let's go back and lower the master lightness of the city footage some more. I feel the footage is starting to look a little bit too flat. To fix this, I will go over to the RGB channel on the curves effect and just push up the contrast a little bit. Yeah, I'm actually quite happy with how that looks. And we're finally ready to add the fireworks into the scene. What I have here is the exported fireworks clip from the first part of the fireworks tutorial. Check out the full tutorial below if you want to learn how to create these cool particle effects using Adobe After Effects and Trapcode particular. I have added this clip into my scene below the base footage so that it sits behind the skyline. Again, to have it follow the camera's movement, we will need to enable the 3D switch on the layer. Then reposition it to wherever you like in your scene. I'm going to place the fireworks right on top of this building so it looks as if they're being launched right off the roof. Maybe a little bit more to the left. Cool, that sits in the scene nicely. Now let's start working on the lighting by first adding some glow being cast against the clouds by the fireworks. Select and duplicate your fireworks layer. I will rename this layer to Fireworks Glow. Then, as you may have expected, apply the glow effect to the fireworks glow layer. Jack up the radius and the intensity until the glow is visible large and strong in the composition. If we now scrub through the clip, it starts to look cool already, but one thing I really don't like is how flat the glow sits on the clouds. We want the glow to look as if it's being cast against the structure of the clouds, not like it was just painted over. We can solve this by applying the clouds as a matte to the glow layer. This will essentially constrain the shape of the glow to the shape of the clouds. For this, select and duplicate the sky layer. Drag this copy directly above the fireworks glow layer. You may notice that even though we dragged it above the fireworks glow layer, it doesn't actually cover it up. That is because both of these layers are 3D layers and the clouds just happen to sit further away from the camera than the fireworks glow. We can fix this up simply by repositioning the duplicated sky to sit in front of the glow. Let's prepare our sky matte by first desaturating it. For this, apply a hue and saturation effect to the layer and lower the master saturation to -100%. Next, since we want our matte to be very high contrast, apply a brightness and contrast effect to the layer as well. Increase the brightness and the contrast properties until your sky looks rather rough and torn. We want fairly harsh shapes of the clouds to be visible. But if things are getting a little bit too rough, you can smoothen them over by applying a simple fast blur effect, which is what I'm going to do here. I just want to smoothen this matte out a tiny bit, so maybe let's set the blurriness to around 2. Finally, select the fireworks glow layer and set the track matte option to Luma. You can, well, if you scrub through the footage, you can barely see the glow. Let's return to the matte layer and jack up the brightness some more. And there it is. But let's also increase the contrast some more until we can see the glow casting strongly against the shape of the clouds. Nice, now that is starting to look cool. Let's take a little break and preview the fireworks effect we have so far. Yep, we're definitely on the way to creating some cool fireworks effects. The one thing we are missing is the light that the fireworks would cast over the entire city as they explode. This is not particularly difficult, but it does require a little bit of detailed masking work. First, duplicate the base footage. Make sure this layer is placed at the very top of your composition and rename it to lighting. Now set the blend mode to add. Your clip will instantly get brighter, which is what we want, but unfortunately everything gets brighter, including the sky, and areas on buildings that would not receive any light. Let's first deal with the sky by reusing our city matte. Duplicate the city matte layer and place this copy directly above the lighting layer. After Effects CC automatically sets the track matte option of the lighting layer to alpha, so the glow now only applies to the buildings in our shot. If that did not happen automatically for you, make sure the track matte option on the lighting layer is set to alpha. Since we want the lighting only to hit certain parts of the building, we need to further restrict which parts of the lighting layer are visible. There are different ways to do this, but I actually prefer to apply another matte. Duplicate the city matte one more time, placing this copy at the very top of your composition. But now we have a problem. Every layer in After Effects can only have one matte, and the lighting layer already has a track matte assigned to it. We can solve this problem by using pre-compositions. Select the lighting layer and the city matte directly above it and pre-compose these two layers. I will call this composition Lighting Comp, and then hit OK. Set the blend mode of this Lighting Comp layer back to Add. Now, one thing that happened is that you will no longer be able to see the lighting layer. This is caused by the fact that the lighting and the city matte layers we pre-composed are actually 3D layers. They are dependent on the 3D tracker camera we have in our current composition. We could just copy the camera into the lighting comp, but there's an even simpler solution. You can simply enable the collapse transformation switch on the lighting comp layer. Bam! Problem solved. Looks exactly like it did before. Note that we can no longer set the blend mode on the lighting comp layer, and frankly, setting it to add just before was rather useless. But I just wanted to make a point. Enabling collapse transformations will basically treat the contents of the lighting comp as if they were part of the current composition, and it will therefore pick up the blending mode and properly apply the 3D camera. Now that our elements are nested, we can set the track matte on the lighting comp layer to alpha matte. Huh? Nothing at all happened. Well, that is because the matte we just enabled here is exactly the same as the one we nested inside the lighting comp. But not for long. Select the city matte above the lighting comp layer and reveal all of the masks that are on it. Select all of those masks and simply delete them. Make sure the layer is still selected and then use the pen tool to draw around the top of one of the buildings where you'd like the lighting from the fireworks to strike. You can go way off into the sky as the lighting layer is transparent in the sky areas anyways, but just make sure to be fairly precise when you go over the buildings themselves. Voila, and now only the tip of the building is illuminated. To make this look a little bit more natural, I recommend to expand the mask properties and increase the mask feather to your liking. Let me zoom back in to show you the effect we've just added into the scene. Quite cool, but this is just the beginning. Now go to town on your footage and apply masks everywhere where you want the lighting from your fireworks to be visible. Feather out your masks where needed, and you can also adjust the mask opacity property to define how strongly lit certain parts of the buildings are. This is useful as some elements very far in the foreground or very far in the background would receive less light from the fireworks spectacle. I will speed through this as I probably spent around 10 minutes adding masks and I don't want to bore you. Just a quick note, towards the end, I actually went back a little bit in my composition to add some masks on the side of my body, as well as on the concrete barrier directly behind me. I felt this added a little bit more realism to me actually being a part of the fireworks scene, and it lets the viewer see the lighting before the camera pans over to the skyline. If you preview the clip now, it looks more like constant moonlight being emitted by the fireworks, which of course isn't what we want, but you can start to see the effect we're going for. Let's give our lighting layer some color to match it up with the color of the fireworks going off. Select the lighting comp layer and apply a hue and saturation effect to it. In the effect settings, enable the colorize option. This will tint the layer in the hue defined by the colorize hue property. We can now tweak the colorize hue and the colorize saturation to change the look and feel of the fireworks lighting. I will actually increase the saturation to around 50 just to add some more color into the lighting. We now want to synchronize the color of the lighting with our fireworks, so enable keyframes on the colorize hue property. Now move through your composition and animate the colorize hue to match up with whatever color your fireworks are giving off. I am mixing colors a little bit when multiple fireworks are going off, and you could go into more detail and add different lighting layers for different colors, but I just wanted to keep it simple for this tutorial. Preview your clip and it should look something like this. The color of the lighting changes in time with the fireworks exploding in the sky. Actually, I think I will tweak this one spot where there's a blue firework going off to actually cast blue light, just because I think it adds a little bit more movement into the color changes. The very last thing to do is to have the light fade in and out in sync with the fireworks. For this, animate the opacity property of the matte layer for the lighting comp. This is entirely up to your taste. Personally, I like to fade the layer in to around 50% just as a new firework explodes and then have it slowly fade back down to around 5 to 10%. I will also add a little bit of animation too just before the camera actually pans over to reveal the fireworks. This way you can see some of the lighting being cast onto me and onto the background before you can actually see where it is coming from. I just think it adds a nice little touch. Remember to always tweak these things to your liking. Now play back your footage and enjoy your final completed fireworks effect. And that's all there is to it. Pretty simple, right? I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. As always, please leave any comments, questions or suggestions in the section below. Please remember to subscribe, hit that like button and share the video around. It really helps out a lot. And if you're hungry for more, you can also find and follow me on Facebook or Twitter. Until next time, I will see you later.